Las Vegas, Nevada, and she's coming directly from Las Vegas today, and I'm talking about Barbara Scott, who is here with us. Barbara is the founder of Presence Management Consulting, with over 2 decades of experience building multi-stakeholder consultative relationships, managing full life cycle projects, and executing strategies to grow, improve, and innovate Fortune 500 businesses using process and technology as conduits to empower people and increase profitability. Through strategic advisory consulting and customized seminars, Barbara assists individuals and organizations with driving an internal ethos of continuous improvement, one person and process at a time. Barbara, it's a joy to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time to share your gifts, your wisdom, and your expertise with our global audience today.
I'm honored. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be in the company of so many great business leaders, speakers, and agents of change. And today, my goal is to help you identify what I call the resistance equation, so that you are equipped with the tools you need to solve for the people factor, the #1 reason improvement initiatives fail. Change agents, or let me see what's going on here. Change agents are often seen as disruptors. And in today's marketplace, being a disruptor is a great thing. Disruption and innovation are what is paving the way to a technologically advanced future. But everyone isn't born with an appetite for change. I know this is true because I am a disruptor who learned to adapt to and appreciate change at a very young age. When I was a little girl, my father was a rolling stone who gathered no moss, meaning we moved around a lot. So between the grades of grade 1 and 6, I attended 13 different elementary schools. And after the first few mid-year changes, I learned to appreciate the change and learned to look at it as an adventure and an opportunity to reinvent myself. I made new friends during that time, and I had new experiences. And since that time, I have led many improvement initiatives that resulted in positive and sustained change. The one thing that consistently connects the past to the future is change. And from a Lean and Six Sigma perspective, all change initiatives are good because they are all based on quantifiable benefits that are designed to generate the results or the required outcomes. But from an organizational and people perspective, change can be painful, and it often traverses a range of resistance factors prior to adoption. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get started. According to 2 renowned organizational behavior scholars, Robert Folger and Daniel Skarlicki, organizational change can generate skepticism and resistance in employees, making it sometimes difficult or impossible to implement organizational improvements. And this is true no matter how good the proposed changes or anticipated results may be. At their peril, organizations are still turning a blind eye to intentional organizational change when implementing improvement initiatives. And failure to acknowledge and deal with the elephant in the room, known as resistance to change, has been and will likely continue to be the cause of many project failures. And after several years of working on projects that were way more difficult to implement than they should have been, I created my own equation for solving this people factor. It can be applied to a variety of organizational change management theories, but really what it comes down to is this: the change event plus the people variable equals the resulting outcome, where X equals respond, react, or resist. Let's explore. It is recognized in an average organization when the intention for change is announced, adoption is as follows: 15% respond favorably and are supportive of the change, 70% have a wait and see attitude and they're sitting on the fence, and 15% are resistant to any change, no matter how good it is or how great the benefits of the change. So, what does this mean in human terms? 15% of the workforce is going to respond. They're going to welcome the change and they're going to be ready for action when this change is introduced. These are the people that can help you create momentum behind the effort. And then there are the 70% that are sitting on the fence and react with a wait and see attitude. They can go on board eventually, or they can turn into a resistor if you cannot provide adequate motivation and inspiration to support the effort. And right out of the gate, you have 15% of the workforce that are resisting and are dead set against it and can be your worst nightmare when attempting to introduce change. But why do people resist change? In many cases, there's not a disagreement. Sorry, I had a little glitch here. Not a disagreement about the benefits. There is unknown ability to adapt. They fear they will not be able to develop new skills and behaviors that are required in a new work setting. There may be resentment and disgruntled employees due to a perceived unfairness of the change. Sometimes this, resistance can even be strong enough to lead to some sort of sabotage. Organizations must pass through as quickly as possible the 4 sources of resistance when introducing change. We have to remember that resistance is natural and inevitable, and it's a reaction that organizations can expect and should expect. Resistance, though, is sometimes hidden, so it may be necessary to take active steps to find it. And there are many reasons for this resistance. It's so important to understand it. So let's explore a bit further. For cognitive resistance is the belief based on their own information and experience that your solution is wrong and the proposed course of action is misguided. This might look like challenging the facts or even discrediting the source or endless debates, or they just quite frankly see the change as a waste of time. But there are ways to approach cognitive resistance. Listen with an open mind. People want to be heard. And incorporate valid and compatible points into the refined solution. and work to broaden the support for the solution. Get resistors to commit to making a small commitment, but you need to remove the remaining resistors. There's also ideological resistance. Those are the people who believe that the proposed solution and required change violates the code of the company culture. And this might come across as challenging the change leader or even just considering it a moral dilemma of some sort. But again, there are ways to approach ideological resistance. Anchor the change in forgotten historical values. Make the new values positive and engaging and uplifting. But be ready to remove resistors. There's also a psychological resistance. Some people do not like change and avoid trying new things at any cost. They have a very low level of tolerance for uncertainty, discomfort, and ambiguity. These people are comfortable with the status quo. They have a fear of things getting worse. They exaggerate how difficult things are. They spread rumors and even demonstrate passive resistance, shaking their head yes when they really mean no. There are ways to approach psychological resistance as well, and that's to make it clear to them what's in it for me and involve them in the development or the improvement of the solution and remove those resistors who spread rumors. You always have to be aware of that passive resistance. Finally, there is the power-driven resistance. When people perceive that the proposed solution will lead to a loss of power, autonomy, and self-control, or they could reduce their status or autonomy. This can result in those resistors forming factions or just complete insurrections. And ways to approach that behavior is to build support with the executive team and increase management participation. You can also use surveys and focus groups, but it's really important to promote and hire people who have the skills and the knowledge required to support a new organization. There are many variables and variations that further add to the complexity we face when introducing change or innovation into our organizations. Not only the individual factors, but also job-specific and organizational factors as well. According to several studies over the years, it has been reported that anywhere from 50 to 70% of improvement initiatives fail, or at least failed to achieve the desired measurable outcomes. But the truth is, if you're leading an improvement initiative, one failure is enough if it is your project. So, if the people factor is the primary obstacle to success, how can you overcome it? Intentional organizational change management. What is organizational change? Organizational change management is permanently altering existing organizational behavior. Let that sink in. That's big. So it's not going to be easy. Management's ability to achieve maximum benefits from the change depends in part on how effectively they create and maintain a climate that minimizes resistance behaviors and encourages acceptance and support. Early in my career, I was brought into a municipality to implement change, moving from manual solid waste collection systems to an automated collection system. These people had those same fears that I mentioned earlier. They were not sure they would have the skills to do their new jobs and feared an unknown future. I found that it was very important to do the math, MATH. I mobilized a team. I had them advocate for the changes. I thanked them when they were able to get other people on board with the changes. And I harvested the positive results to implement even more change. I remembered the people factor and addressed their concerns by listening to them. And I provided them with the skills, the training, and the information they needed to fit in to the new culture. There are many factors to consider when addressing resistance to change. These include individual factors such as age, experience, and time in the job. And there are job specific factors like autonomy, job security, and flexibility. The organizational factors like structure and politics are also of key importance. We are going to quickly explore the 8 mistakes in leading change so that we have more time to delve into the solutions. Nothing will change without change. There is no innovation fairy sprinkling change dust across your organization. So this leads us to the number one mistake in leading change is allowing too much complacency. You have an insufficient sense of urgency or a lack of a visible crisis or low expectations or just accepting mediocrity. Mistake number 2 is failing to create a sufficiently powerful guiding coalition. You don't get the right people involved, or you don't have the right stakeholders at the table. And mistake number 3, underestimating the power of vision. You can't take too long to describe the vision. Or if your vision is not sufficiently compelling to excite and inspire the stakeholders, that's another problem. Mistake number 4 is under communicating the vision by a factor of 10 or 100 or 1,000. We'll talk about that more later. Mistake number 5 is permitting obstacles to block the new vision. If you have a lack of organizational support, a lack of recognition systems, or if there's just lip service, or worse, from influential stakeholders, and even sometimes your tenured naysayers can be the block to that new vision. Mistake number 6 is you fail to plan for and create short-term wins. You don't plan for achievable short-term wins, or you fail to establish immediate goals, or you even ignore those who achieve the objectives, and you fail to reward those who are involved. Mistake number 7 is declaring victory too soon. This is confusing a short-term win with a long-term victory. And this will sometimes cause initiators to just go overboard, or the resistors will breathe a sigh of relief, feeling like they've skated by another change that they didn't have to support. Or there is the failure to maintain a sense of urgency. And finally, mistake number 8 is neglecting to anchor those changes firmly into the culture. Failing to show people how the changes have improved the things, or failing to make those connections for them, and letting the changes be just perceived as a one-time thing. There are many different change management methodologies. Those include Lewin's change management model, McKinsey's 7S model, the nudge theory, Bridges' transition model, and Kotter's theory, which is the first to focus less on the change itself and more on the people behind it. By inspiring a sense of urgency and maintaining the momentum, Kotter's theory can be used to great effect in adapting your business culture to a climate of change. The 8-step process leading to change can be broken down into 3 categories. The first category is creating a climate for change. You establish the sense of urgency, you create the guiding coalition, and you develop a vision and strategy. The second category, in engaging and enabling the organization, this is where you're communicating the change vision itself. You begin empowering your organization and you start to generate some of those short-term wins. Category 3, implementing and sustaining change, is where you make it stick. By consolidating gains and producing even more change, and ultimately making the new behaviors part of the culture. Let's dive deeper into the first category, creating a climate for change. The effort put into these steps is crucial for establishing the foundation for your change initiatives. Step 1, establishing a sense of urgency. When leaders create a sense of urgency, they basically alert the organization as to why the change must occur. With the sense of urgency, the organization understands why change is no longer an option. In the interest of time, I have included this slide and the next slide as a takeaway exercise for you to use when developing a sense of urgency for your change initiatives. For this activity, you'll find a partner and you'll explain your change challenge. Then you can use these change leadership challenge questions to further refine your sense of urgency for your change initiative. You have no doubt heard this quote or seen a meme on Facebook, but this is a true story. Did you know that 2 draft horses pulling together cannot pull twice as much as one? They can actually pull 3 times as much. The 2 draft horses that can each pull 8,000 pounds alone can pull 24,000 pounds working together. These horses are teaching us a very clear lesson in teamwork and why the next step in leading change is important to gaining momentum for your change initiative. Creating a stakeholder community happens by understanding the challenges they faced in their area of operational ownership and finding ways to reduce the resources required to achieve the desired results. You need to assemble a small group of 3 to 5 like-minded people, create trust among those people, and Develop a common goal. Make sure that there's a good mix of stakeholders, and be sure to select intelligent leaders and respected people in your organization. I've included this slide as a takeaway exercise to use you as you develop your guiding coalition for your change initiative. Think about who the members of your guiding coalition could be. Identify what their roles would be in your change, and describe to yourself how you ask them for help. Step number 3, creating a vision and strategy. Creating a vision and strategy for change is more about storytelling than it is about facts and figures. It's about solidifying the creation of the environment or climate for change. It ensures that everybody key to the success of the program are on the journey with you. Here is an example of how you can pull together your vision for step number 3. You spin it. You take the situation, you explain the current facts. Then P, the problem with that is, I, the implication, and that means, and then the need, N, therefore we need to. And now that you've laid the foundation with your sense of urgency and developing your guiding coalition, and you have your vision ready, now you're ready to begin communicating the vision, empowering the stakeholders to take action, and begin to plan for and create short-term wins. You can never over-communicate a major change initiative. Openly and honestly address people about their concerns and anxieties. Apply your vision to all aspects of operations. Lead by example, and talk about the vision or change often. Consider this. The total communications going to an employee in 3 months is 2.3 million words or numbers. The typical communication of a change vision over the same 3-month period is a mere 13,400 words. The change vision only captures 0.58%, less than 1% of the communication market share. And step 5 is empower others to act. Once you've communicated sensible visions to your stakeholders, they'll then have a shared sense of purpose, and it will be easier to initiate actions to achieve that purpose. Provide the training for stakeholders. Without the right skills and attitudes, people feel disempowered. Provide data and scorecards to track progress, and confront stakeholders who undercut your vision. Nothing damages progress the way a bad example can. And take action to quickly remove barriers. Step 6 is planning and creating short-term wins. The role of those short-term wins is that they provide evidence that the effort is worth it. Reward your achievers with a pat on the back, and then undermine the cynics and self-serving resistors with clear improvements. This makes it difficult to block change. Be sure to keep your believers on board and continue to build momentum. The final category in Kotter's change framework is implementing and sustaining change. Here is where you consolidate gains and produce even more change, creating a climate for ongoing continuous improvement, while institutionalizing the new attitudes into the culture. So step number 7 is consolidating gains and still producing more change. Remove impediments. Ask what's getting in the way and fix it, and keep up the sense of urgency. Invite new and re engage those less engaged stakeholders along the way. But in today's fast paced, ever changing workplace, stakeholders can quickly fall into a place of transformation fatigue, which is why it's so important to create a culture that embraces change as the norm. Step 8, institutionalizing new attitudes into the culture. Remember the 3 C's of culture: clear, consistent, and comprehensive. Cotter outlines a checklist for culture. Culture comes last, not first. You must prove that the new way is superior to the old. The success must be communicated, and you have to know that you will lose some people in the process. Reinforce the culture with every new employee onboarded. As the organization works its way through these 8 steps, there can be a negative impact on productivity. This is referred to as the productivity dip. There will almost always be a dip in the middle of the curve. Those who fail to plan for a mid-course dip will get an early false read that the changes are failing. Now, not all changes experience this dip, but most do. And it's better to predict a dip and plan for it than to deny the likelihood or jump overboard like a group of panicked rats leaving a sinking ship when it starts to reveal itself. Cotter's 8-step process for leading change is a solid system for driving change in an organization. From change agent through to the guiding coalition, and lastly, through to the ingrained culture. This can ensure a higher probability of success in building a more agile, wise, and receptive organization that effectively handles the quickly changing situations that we confront today. Transformation and innovation are driven by an underlying strategy that organizes and energizes people to understand, embrace, and make full use of new process and technology. And at the end of the day, to be sure, you need to provide adequate attention to the human side of improvement initiatives. You will eliminate one of the greatest causes of failure, the unsolved people factor. Now, there are all kinds of opportunities in our work and in our lives and in our communities to introduce change that can improve the current situation or solve a problem. But when it comes to leading change, start where you stand. Serve your fellow man and give a helping hand, because no government, corporation, or organization alone can solve the economic, societal, or environmental challenges that exist around the world today. It is going to take the people, one person at a time. We can change the world. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you for your presentation. You cover so much about what the importance of change leadership and the good, the bad, and the ugly that we
Yes.
have witnessed through so many different organizations. So what there's a lot of interesting commentary going on and questions while you're presenting, and one of them it was an interesting insight because you're referring to Cotter and change management and change leadership. The knowledge has been there for quite some time, but we have not seen improvement across industries. We continue, change initiatives continue to fail at a higher rate than when probably Cotter first released his work and people start implementing his work. So what's going on? Why do you think the failure rate for implementing positive change has declined instead of improved over the time, even though we have the knowledge now about how to do it better?
I think it comes back to that first mistake, Jose, the complacency. We believe that if we're implementing change in the organization, that people will just automatically get on board with it. This is what you got to do. This is part of your job. But, as I mentioned, there are so many factors that cause people to look at change, in a fearful way instead of seeing, the benefits and how they can be a part of it. So, that communication, we are bombarded with communication, right? We talked about, the millions of words that get sent to us, and so that's part of the challenge, right? We're over communicating. There's so much information, but so it's got to be really clear and regular and consistent, and so that the organization knows that this is not just something that's going to be fly by night. This is not just something that we're just talking about today and it's going to be gone tomorrow. So I think that we've just got to get better at not being complacent, recognizing the importance of communication, and being intentional about getting people on board with change.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm gonna one of the things that you and I both have the privilege of doing is to interact with a lot of leaders across multiple organizations in different industries. And one of the things that's striking to me as I work with C-level leaders around the world is that the high level of turnover on those C-level leaders. In the United States, the average CEO has a tenure of about 3 years. So how do you implement consistent change and culture when the senior leadership is changing, every 3 years or so in an organization? That's a real challenge, and I think that reflects in a lot of the poor deployment of strategy, of vision, of culture development. Um, so related to that, some people were asking, if my senior leaders are switching, if they are inconsistent with vision, but I'm a lower level leader at the organization. I'm not the CEO, right? There's no doubt the higher you are in the organization, the bigger the shadow of leadership that you cast in the rest of the organization. So if I'm a lower level leader, or maybe just a professional, I don't even have hierarchical leadership over anybody. How can I help my organization change in the right direction? Should I just give up and go look for another organization, but that other organization is going to have the same problem of the organization that I'm currently dealing with, so I'm just going to lose my mind? What do I do? Do I just tune it out? Because that's what a lot of people do. They just start saying, you know what, if it doesn't hit me, I'm going to wait until it dies a slow death and it's going to
Yeah,
go
that
away,
that wait
right?
and see, those 70% sitting on the fence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there
So
any hope for professionals? What do you suggest to a professional who is kind of like in this change quagmire?
So what I believe to be true is, at that first layer level of management, you can work at that layer, building a stakeholder community, your own guiding coalition amongst your peers, coming together, for ideas that can help each other. So I say that if you can't get the consistency at the top of the house, work across your peer area, find other people that can benefit from whatever the change is, and get them to get on board with you. It's about, I said, those trusted members of the organization. They're not always at the top of the house. They're sometimes middle management, but it's people that the organization, that have been in the organization and that are trusted in the organization, those people can come together and build their own guiding coalition that can help keep the momentum in place even when leadership is, kind of, leaving the organization.
Very good point. Very good point. Listen, I wanna go to a straight question from the audience here, and Karen Zanetti is asking a question. It's a very specific type of question, but this is what we do here. We get to the specifics. So her question is, how would you handle a situation where a member of the change coalition is not participating? So, for example, in all the training, however, the project manager says it's okay, and that the person's manager knows about the lack of attendance, and they do have access to the recordings. It will take time, 6 to 12 months, to see if the individual's area improves in proficiency. I mean, this is an interesting commentary. There's a lot of passive aggressive resistance out there, right? People
Yeah.
don't even have the courage to resist to something. They just passively aggressively resist to it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with situations like that?
That's an interesting one. But that's, comes back to those resistors, right? They're resisting, but they're resisting in a way that's not as evident. And I think that, uh, it's first off, the change leader, I think that they need to have a frank conversation with that person. There needs to be that open and honest, communication, get an understanding of why they're pushing back or why they're not participating. And if they don't intend to participate, ask them if they would like to be removed from the initiative, because maybe somebody else could be in there more. But I do think it comes back to that communication and calling them out, because what's happened, again, kind of back to the first question is, people have stopped calling people out, like, oh well, I'll just let them, they're going to do their job, or they're not going to do their job. But in a change initiative where you're trying to change their culture, either they need to get on the bus or they need to find another bus to get on.
Yeah, you discussed a very important point. Those difficult conversations. In really meaningful change, you can't have spectators, going
No.
around. You need to be engaged, or you need to move. Um, you bring a point there that's very important. Tell us a little bit about courage and the importance of courage in leading change.
Yeah, you saw my Wonder Woman at the end of my presentation, because that is, for me, I do think that we all sort of have to stand up and be our own superheroes today. When we recognize that there's important change that needs to occur, because maybe it's, when they need to be encouraged in that vision statement to look beyond the walls of their organization and see how, if they do not keep up, in their environment, in their business, that they're going to get passed by other organizations, other competitors. And that's not going to be good for anyone in the organization. You want to stay relevant in an industry. So I think that each of us do have to have courage. You have to, change takes, that it's a risk. There's always a risk with change, because you're never sure what the outcome is going to be, but you put in all of the framework to try to, to control the outcome as much as you can. But I do think that, change leaders, like I said, I became a disruptor because I had to experience a whole lot of disruption in my life. But once you are able to, adapt to that, and it becomes a part of who you are, then the courage is not, it doesn't require quite so much courage, because now you've seen it can be done, you've done it, you've been successful. So now the next time you go back a little stronger for your next initiative.
Barbara, thank you for sharing your wisdom and your expertise, your view, and the kind of like systematic approach to leading positive change. So on behalf of our global audience, we want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.
You too. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Barbara Scott talking about leading positive change, becoming a true change agent, and the systematic approach that you can take for that. We're going to be taking a break now, and if you have comments, you want to connect with our speakers, look under the LinkedIn post under my name for this conference, Enterprise Agile Planning Live. Make a comment, say thanks to our sponsors, say thanks to our speakers, connect with them directly, ask follow-up questions if you'd like to. When we come back, we are going to be meeting Audrey Boyston, who is the Enterprise Transformation Leader for Scale Agile. And Audrey is going to be talking to us about leading with intention. How do you infuse core values into your leadership? So don't want to miss that session. We'll be closing this current session and back at the top of the hour.